From the studios of Clean Fuels Alliance America, this is the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast. Fascinating ideas and conversations in the world of biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel. Now, here's your host, Scott Tremaine.
And welcome. This week, MARC-IV's Alan Weber is joined by Chad Berghoefer, Global Product Director of Biofuels for Corteva, as they discuss the need for low-carbon oilseed crops, the difference between spring canola and winter canola, a new effort to increase winter canola acres in the Mid-South, and more on the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast.
Hey, Chad, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Alan.
Really good to have you as our guest here today so we can learn a little bit more about Corteva's effort to increase acreage of winter canola in the Mid-South, which I know that you guys are then planning to be able to have as a feedstock, which would be used to produce low-carbon biofuels. But before we do, as you know, I farm, and in the region where I'm at, so I'm in central Missouri, a lot of us know Corteva, but we know Corteva as corn and soybean genetics, but you're a lot more than that, right?
That is true, yes. Corteva is a lot more. Definitely corn and soybeans are I would say, the main crops that we look at and have focused on, but we also have a lot of other ones. Cotton is one of those. Spring canola is another one. Sorghum, rice, and others. And it's just not the U.S., right? It's global, I would say, as well. So It's been a fun transition. We've gone through some transitions in the past, but now we're, as Corteva.
Yeah, so legacy, right? We pioneer.
Yes. Yep.
So, I think of that a lot.
And so through all this, right, and now we're at a phase now where when you look at the industry and the growing demand for biofuels, it's helped focus our efforts. And although we've been supporting the whole biofuel effort from a Corteva standpoint, corn, soybeans, what have you. But now it's a little bit different now because we're changing up an actual cropping system with winter canola. And that's really what the interesting part is.
And I really keyed in on that because I noticed you said spring canola, and then now you're saying winter canola. Right. So you're making a distinct difference between the two. Help me out there.
Yeah, so from a plant standpoint, you think about the crop physiology, if you think about oil profile of the seed, all that stuff is the same. The only difference between the two is in spring canola, mostly grown for us up in the Dakotas and into Canada, is growing there. Is obviously, we call it spring canola because it's planted in the spring. However, when you look at winter canola, the only thing different there is it requires a cold spell, or we call it vernalization. And so what happens here is that we plant it, in this case, in the Mid-South. And when I say Mid-South, I'm talking like Western Kentucky, Tennessee is where we're starting this project. And you plant this in mid to late September. Not normally what you would do with a crop that we think of when we think about corn, soybeans, and cotton, right? And so we plant this in mid-September. And because we're dealing with really warm soils at that time, we planted one day. In about 3 to 5 days, this plant comes out of the ground, and then it grows for about the next, we call it heat units, but I'm going to say for the next 2 months.
Okay.
All right. And in those 2 months, that plant will grow incredibly fast, and we get up to what we call about 5 to 8 leaves, or the rosette stage. Yeah, it's just a green material.
Yeah, and rosette is exactly what I'm thinking of, right? It looks kind of like a rosette with petals coming out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. But these leaves are huge on it as well, right? So they look very differently. As the temperature starts dropping, weather changes, right? We're starting to get into the fall and potentially winter, is the plant actually starts going through a process where it starts slowing down growth, but it starts accumulating sugars and starches in its root system as well as the leaves. And so they start changing colors a little bit on you. It looks a little bit weird out in there, and most people aren't used to seeing that. Winter canola can stand temperatures almost down to 0 degrees for an extended period of time. And so it continually grows up to that point. But because of that transition, it goes through now what's called vernalization, that cold snap, right?
So what happens if it gets too cold? Like can it withstand really intense cold snaps? Or
it can. A key point to it is making sure that we have that slow, I would say, decreasing temperatures throughout the days to get there. But yeah, once we've kind of acclimated that plant to it, it can withstand some pretty cold temps, and even colder if it has a little bit of snow on top of it as well.
Okay. So you said spring canola and winter canola, but most canola in the United States is spring, correct? That's what you said?
Yes. If you look at the United States, there's roughly about 2 million acres of spring canola planted, mostly in the northern states, like I said, in the Dakotas, a little bit in Montana, those kind of things.
But is there already some winter canola grown in the United States?
There is some winter canola grown in the United States. There are different types. But yeah, there has been some smaller markets, and I would say majority of it, if you look across the plains, and I'll say it's called winter hardiness. Winter hardiness kind of gives you an idea of what plants will survive the winter throughout the United States, right?
So our farm is in central Missouri, so we're about halfway between St. Louis and Kansas City. Yep. So could I plant winter canola?
You could, yeah. In that zone, you kind of look at the lower half of Kansas and Oklahoma, and you cut that across in through Missouri and Kentucky, even southern part of Illinois, and it kind of comes up northern, almost up to Maryland is how it kind of arcs at that point.
But you're going to concentrate first, you said, in the Mid-South, so Kentucky, Tennessee. Now, in our area, we're a typical corn, soybean rotation. So with the way you described it, winter canola is going to fit in the fall after harvest of one of the other crops. And I guess I should ask, because the Mid-South is going to be different, right, in terms of what they're growing. So what are the typical rotations in the Mid-South, and how does winter canola fit in with what farmers are already growing there?
Yep. Right now, I would say majority is probably we're going to follow corn.
Okay.
So corn harvested, it's a little bit different than the Midwest. Corn's harvested actually early, I should say, in the Mid-South compared to the northern states. And so we're harvesting it out late, depending on the season, obviously, and the maturity of the hybrid we're looking at. But they'll harvest it usually the first part of September. And so that's coming off, and within a day or two, we're planting winter canola right behind it.
Is there a time that's too late? Like, can you be too late to plant canola?
Yeah, because part of it is you need that plant to have enough time to grow before it gets too cold, right? That's the game we're kind of playing here with it. And so if you plant too late, which we did a number of years back, it got really dry, and it wasn't worth planting yet. There was just no moisture in the ground. And we did still plant some research plots and some other plots out there to see, but we didn't actually get rain till almost Halloween. And when we did, everything sprouted. It was great, right? But I only had about a month and a half. I didn't have enough time to grow that out. And then around Christmas time, it went from 50 degrees down to 0 in about 24 hours, and it wiped out everything. The plant just wasn't big enough. You know, another indication when you look at just winter hardiness is, yes, you need about 5 to 8 leaves out there, but also it's the stem diameter as well. If your stem diameter is roughly a quarter to a half an inch wide, that means you have enough starch reserves in the root system so it can regenerate when it goes through these cold snaps. And we just didn't have that then.
Yeah, so I think I've told you before, I think we've tried winter canola at our farm.
Okay.
It's been a number of years ago, but just to make sure I'm still on track, we call it the crown. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so the crown. So you were taking me through. So we're kind of through the winter, and then the next spring. What are we looking at in terms of when should we expect to see that plant start growing again?
Sure. Again, it's weather dependent, but most of the time you're going to see it probably toward the end of February, first part of March. It starts growing back up, greening back up, new tissue starts out, and then we get into what's called the bolting phase, all right? This is when the stalk just bolts up, and we start seeing pods and flowers starting to set up at that point.
Yeah, so those flowers, so this is I remember this part. It's just yellow across the entire field, right?
It is something to behold. I tell you what, it is fun. And I had a chance to talk to some growers that have grown it in the past, and they would tell me stories about the people just stopping alongside the road and walking out there and taking pictures. He said, we had a wedding party come out, want to take pictures out there.
You're going to have all the influencers of social media taking pictures.
It's going to be grand. It's going to be grand. And so, yeah, even now, the fields that we have out there, even seeing a green field at this time of year, people ask a lot of questions. We get that from the research center, say people are driving by asking what we're doing. It does get a lot of interest.
So it's interesting. I was talking about winter canola the other day with somebody, and they're saying, well, winter canola, spring canola, is it the same? Like, is the oil the same from each of them? Is there any differences? Or
nope. The oil profile overall is the same. And depending on hybrid that we have. So we're talking about hybrid winter canola. I should mention that as well. It's not open pollinated.
Yeah. So what's the difference?
Well, the difference is an open pollinator, right? The plant's just selfing itself when it pollinates. When you talk about a hybrid canola, we're using both a male and female. And so we're using the pollen from one along with the flower from the other one to cross-pollinate to create that hybrid in that case.
And going back to college, hybridization usually means increased yields.
Yes, it does. Yep. You usually can help breed a lot of nice agronomic effects from that, right? Whether it's disease tolerance, yield is a big one in there as well. Even plant or winter hardiness is also another piece of that too. So yeah, it's a big deal. It does make it interesting when you talk about the production of hybrid winter canola, right? That requires a very unique situation to have. We actually are in the process of growing our own supply here in the United States out in the Pacific Northwest. And it requires bringing in beehives to do this as well. We require on those folks, the bees, if you will, to help in that cross-pollination.
And where is that seed? Are you doing that in the United States?
We are, yeah. So today we do not have U.S. production of winter canola, but we are in the process of building that out, and that will be in the Pacific Northwest. And so we have some fields out there that we're working through this year, and we should actually have some U.S. production of winter canola.
Now, have you already had test plots? You've already worked on introducing winter canola into the Mid-South, or are you just getting started?
So we've been testing our hybrids for about 4 years. And so we've been doing it through third-party Kansas State University trials. They do a great job with this, as well as our own internal testing too. And so we bring a lot of our material, in fact, all of our material, over from Europe today, where it is grown, where a lot of the breeding's at, and we start screening it over here. And so by doing that, we are able to see where the best performance was of the hybrids we have, where would it best to launch it at that point, what research centers do we have in play, and we start just building on that as well. And so over these 4 years, we have 3 internal research centers working on this, soon to add another one here in time, as well as continue on with the Kansas State University trials too.
Yeah, that's Dr. Mike Stom, right?
It
that's
is,
doing
yeah,
that work.
Does a great job.
So you have, this is not a small little thing. You're putting a lot of resources behind making sure that you've got the right genetics, the right hybrids to introduce.
Yeah, it's amazing at times what we within Corteva can do and what resources we can bring to bear to bring some of this out. It's impressive. Sometimes we see the bag at the end of the field, a nice photo of it, right? And it looks great. And the work that goes behind that to make that all work. You think about when we did actually have the announcement just 11 months ago. And from that point forward, it was game on. And so spinning up not only our research teams, but our seed production teams and then our commercial teams, as well as in engaged growers and talking about what this all looks like, what's the expectations, what can you expect, a lot of questions from them as well. It was a lot to do within about 5 months before we started planting this in the ground. So a lot of moving parts. It's kudos to everybody that's helped out internally at Corteva, but I would also say Bunge and Chevron have been part of this journey as well, and they have been great in supporting this too.
You got me so excited earlier talking about the yellow blooms and seeing the fields that I never let you finish, but I really want to know. I want to finish out from a farmer's perspective, because so the field is bloomed and you've set pods and they're mature, they're ready to harvest. When is that typically for the Mid-South? So
again, I always reiterate to saying it's weather dependent somewhat, but we should be finishing up toward the end of May, maybe first week of June, is when the plant is mature enough to harvest. And we can actually use a desiccant. So this is a chemical we spray that artificially kills the plant. Now, why would we do that? Well, when a winter canola is growing, it's indeterminate, so it continually grows. It's always putting on pods.
So you're going to have green pods at the same point in time that you have pods ready to harvest. I got it.
And so as you're getting more mature, the upper part is your greenest part of the pods at the point. That's the newest ones out there, right? And down toward the lower part of the plant, that's the oldest pods. Those are the ones that are probably mature and dark colored at that time. So we come through and we artificially kill it, if you will, which is not normal, but although it's done in a lot of different other agricultural settings, I will say. Sunflowers is a good example. They do that too for pre-harvest. And so we do this, and so you know exactly when you're going to harvest as well. Now, typically, having green seeds is not a good thing when you think about human use. Yep. But when you're thinking about biofuel use, that's not a big deal for them. And so it helps us maybe push a little earlier when we would harvest in that May. And there's a reason for that, and we'll get to that. But so you desiccate the plant, and within about 2 or 3 days, you're coming through and harvesting that. It dries down that fast.
So I've got a friend that farms in North Dakota, and he raises spring canola. And so I'll give him a call on the cell phone, and he'll be out there actually windrowing his canola.
There you go.
Now, he comes back later after it dries to pick it up. But you said using a desiccant. So is that the system you're going to use to harvest, or are you going to use a typical direct cut?
We will use the desiccant followed with a direct cut is how this will work. One of the reasons they do, like on spring canola, they windrow it in the past, and what they've done is partially because they're controlling pod shatter. That's a big yield loss in this. So keep in mind, canola seed is about 2 millimeters wide in diameter, right? So it is extremely small. A pound of winter canola has about 100,000 seeds in it.
Yeah,
right?
that's the old joke, right? If you're going to raise canola, you should invest in duct tape.
Yes, you should.
Yeah.
Because you got to duct tape everything up on that combine. Otherwise, it's a really nice sieve and a spreader for seeds that get out of the combine behind you, too. But again, I think we have a solution for that as well. Part of it is new products that are coming. Some of the new winter canola products coming have pod shatter resistance. So these pods tend to hold a little tighter onto it so they don't bust open when you come through in straight cut. Maybe you got too dry or something. They don't tend to bust up as much, and we lose off the header in this case. So that's a big plus. Those are coming.
This is the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast. Fascinating ideas and conversations in the world of biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel.
I'm Alan Weber, and we're speaking with Chad Berghoefer with Corteva. And Chad, I introduced the podcast saying that winter canola was a feedstock for low-carbon biofuels.
Yeah.
And that aspect of a decreased carbon footprint, it's key in today's market, right? So why do you say that winter canola is a low-carbon feedstock?
Sure. Yep. Nope. Glad to explain. So when we think about low carbon, right, the big part of that is land use. And so with winter canola, which is nice, it's not disrupting the main crops, the main summer crops in this case. And it doesn't disrupt the next crop following it either. And so by doing this, the land that we are currently aiming toward would have been fallow, nothing growing on it. It could have been no-till or could have been tilled, hard to say. Depends on the grower and their management practices. And so the idea is to put this right in between those two other, I'll say, optimized systems between corn and soybeans to make this work. And it does fit in nicely. Now, with that said, there's always modifications to it. There's always some streamlining to do, but making good progress on it we are.
Yeah, so I really noted that, the fact that basically this would be a new crop, which means new supplies of additional oil coming into the marketplace to be used as biofuels. The other thing I noted earlier that you had said in the podcast was that this crop would be harvested probably even as early as late May, but into the first part of June. So that's going to allow, especially in the Mid-South, that's going to let those growers come back in and plant another crop right after, correct?
Right. Yep. And so mostly that other crop will be soybeans, right?
Okay.
Double crop soybeans that they plant afterwards. And the great story is I've had a chance to talk to a lot of growers about this when we were initially setting it up and asking them questions about it. Unsolicited, they would always respond back to me. One of the reasons I like winter canola, and I've grown in the past, let's say, like you have, Alan, is that secondary crop, in this case soybeans, yields better. And they can't explain why. There's not a lot of scientific data showing that, but to a T, every grower I talk to mentioned that. And so we're obviously intrigued by that at Corteva, and we're starting to do some rotation study trials and stuff as that. There's a lot of ideas why that is. It could be just the fact that you can plant earlier with your double crop beans compared to maybe another winter crop out there, right? That might be part of it. There's other ideas or other thoughts around why that would be, but in the end, growers believe that's where it's going, and that's what it does for them. And they have the data to show it.
Well, one of the things that I think it's related to is that taproot that canola has. And
absolutely.
And so, on our farm, we make a lot of use of cover crops, and we do that for a lot of reasons. We want to have something on the soil to decrease soil erosion. It helps us with nutrient cycling, nutrient management. So, there are some growers in the mid-states, the mid-south, that are making use of cover crops. There's a lot of good ecosystem service benefits of a cover crop. What about canola? Is it going to fill that niche too, or?
It will. And the reason why is because, like I mentioned, when we plant it here in September, right, it shoots out of the ground and it grows incredibly fast. And these big broad leaves help in protecting the soil. That root system that you mentioned, that taproot, it's amazing the size of root system you get on even in a couple months with this as well. And then the other thing about it too is even when you have areas of the field, maybe where you did have some winter canola, or maybe you didn't get the stand you wanted, the winter canola has the capacity to basically spread out even further, kind of like soybeans, but even more so. And so
it branches
branching
out.
Yep. Plants just get bigger, wider, if you will. It's an amazing thing. And the other thing is, I will say too, is as it branches out, all the stems start coalescing. The branches coalesce. It is incredibly hard to walk through. Even some people say they see a deer kind of try to walk into this stuff and it can't make it, so it kind of backs its way out as well. So it's a good deterrent, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say if you can stop the deer population from grazing on our crops, you've accomplished something. That's for sure. You know, we've actually over the years on our farm we've tried some different crops, and I never told you, but the reason we planted winter canola was actually for a mushroom grower.
Really?
We did it under contract, and they were using, because it's about 40% oil, high energy. And they were actually using the canola as an energy source to grow button mushrooms. It was a European technique. And I've also worked with grain amaranth, which is a pseudo cereal. So the one thing I've noticed is that any new crop is challenging to be able to introduce into a system of rotation. So
true.
Have you, or maybe what are you expecting from growers in terms of the challenges to be able to introduce some acres in the Mid-South?
You know, one of the there's obviously several challenges when you introduce a new crop to an already optimized cropping system that's out there, right? A couple of them were this. The first one I would say when we were out talking with growers is growers were telling me this is the third time that someone has come talk to me about a new cropping system. It wasn't always winter canola, but a lot of times it was. And they said, we get it planted, we're all excited, and then we get about a year, and then all of a sudden the company that was promoting it is now gone. Then, and we're stuck here with this. And so they're a little bit hesitant at times, thinking this is going to work. Now, how do we get over that one? Well, when you show up with Corteva, Bunge, and Chevron sitting across the table from you saying that we are in a line for how this is going to work, and this is how it's going to work, and these are the locations we're going to deliver it to, and these are the folks who are going to provide the research, and these are the guys going to turn this into renewable diesel or some other renewable fuel, right?
Yeah, so I want to key in on just that point because I want to kind of emphasize it. I don't think I've told you this, but I actually, early in my career, I was still in graduate school, I worked on an effort to introduce winter canola into the Mid-South. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, we felt like we were making some progress with growers. Probably one of those growers that said that they tried it before. And there was a processing facility that was supposed to take the canola in Chattanooga.
Yep.
Fell through. Guess what happened? So did our acreage. But you've got some great partners lined up. So I want you to emphasize that again in terms of once that canola is harvested, kind of where does it go in the supply chain from there to turn into that low carbon biofuel that all of us want to see?
Yep. And so, and that has been the point that most growers talk about, is that because of this agreement that we have between the three companies, they feel a lot more confident in this. And so how it really works, and I'm very simple, all right? We provide the research, the seed, on the farm, boots on the ground support, right? Bunge provides the locations to deliver this to. And they're strategic, just like we are, is where we're going to place this. So they're talking to growers around where's the best place to deliver this, and they're using their resources to make sure they secure those locations. Most of them are going to be close to the river, to be honest with you. We're right up there where the Ohio River meets the Mississippi River and down, right? So all this is going to end up going on a barge. It goes down to Louisiana, where Bunge has one of their crush facilities that can crush both soybeans, but also softseed. And softseed is canola in this case. They're going to crush it, and then just up the road from them is the Chevron renewable diesel plant that's up there. One of the bigger ones in the world.
In the nation, yep.
And so those pieces and parts, everything just works, right? And once I think the grower understands that and sees this commitment from all these three companies, one, they're excited about it, right? They may not always show it, but they are excited about it. And even I had one guy, we were giving the presentation, and he's like, Chad, I love this. This is great. I'm not going to be a part of it. I said, I appreciate your honesty, but it was, I think it was in October. I was walking his field that had winter canola in it. He jumped in. Okay. So I think once they understand how this works and the companies that are behind it that want it to make it work, I think is amazing.
Yeah.
And
I think I can speak for the psyche of a farmer. They want to see it, and so I bet you're right. I bet once you see some fields going that you can get some.
And I don't blame them, right? Why wouldn't you have kind of a questionable eye at first, knowing what you've gone through in the past, right? Now they see it's working. They'll see it at harvest when we get the results. Right now, I'm expecting pretty good results. We haven't had a lot of hiccups along the way, and I think we'll see this grow very, very fast for us, which we needed to, right? The demand for biofuels in general is growing fast, and we want to find those products that can help fill that gap and not just rely on the current corn and soybeans, which we're glad to, but we need to find additional resources too for it.
Yeah. We've been talking a lot about the winter canola as the crop and where it's going to go, but your title is the Global Director of Biofuels. Mm-hmm. But obviously, the agronomics, and so you've got to come from an agronomy. How do you make that leap from agronomy into all of a sudden you're the director of biofuels?
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up on a farm in Iowa. We raised corn, soybeans, alfalfa, feeder cattle, right? We didn't raise anything else. But in my experience, I've had a chance to visit around the globe with a lot of different growers doing different stuff. I even had a chance, I spent a small amount of time at Walt Disney World actually working in the land pavilion at Epcot, where they grow all different kinds of crops as well.
Fun.
Yeah, it was a great time. It's where I met my wife of now 32 years.
That's even better.
It worked out well for me.
There are some good memories there.
That's right. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So when you look at agronomics, and we're fortunate to have a lot of agronomists within Corteva as well that are key in this, and just like you, they also worked on canola and winter canola in this case, and are great resources for it, as well as we leverage our folks across the pond here too. So even the agronomists in France and stuff have been supportive of this and what we can do and what we should do. As long as, I also mentioned, there's a lot of growers in the area that have grown winter canola in the past. And so they're all very somewhat in tune with it. The hurdles we run into, right, is seeds here. How do I adjust my planter? It's been a while since I do it. I have a new planter. How do I adjust planter? So working with equipment people is critical in this. When you get into things like even at harvest, again, it's equipment discussion. We have discussions around weed control as well. It's a little bit tricky, but we can get through it in those kind of cases. Those are all key. So back to your initial question around how did I get into this, right, is from an agronomics are still key across no matter what product you have. They just tweak a little bit. You still have fertilizer there. You still have crop protection there, seed placement, timing, all those things matter. It's just kind of, I'm learning along, but I have a lot of really good resources to draw from, not only from our field team, but also our research teams as well.
Obviously, though, if you've created a biofuels division, you're, as a company, putting some focus on that.
Absolutely. I think, with Corteva, we are very interested in this. We've always supported the biofuels through corn and soybeans and the efforts there to always increase performance for our growers so everybody can take advantage of this. But when we bring in a new crop like winter canola, I'll say newish because it's been used before, like you mentioned on your farm, but in a little different way and for a reason for biofuels, right? Specifically for biofuels. And so, yeah, that's unique. And I think it's opened the eyes of even internally within Corteva to say, hey, we need to think about some other options here too.
So 4 years of testing already. So does that mean that you are contracting then with farmers in the area for acres now? Okay.
Yeah. So we had about 5 months to get everybody ready, not only everything to get the seed ready, but also to get producers ready as well. And so we were fortunate enough to have about 16 growers give us or plant about 5,000 acres of winter canola this year that have a lot of eyes on them, I would say, and everybody's watching them and tracking them as well, which is great. In the research plots we have as well, we have a number of research plots throughout, I'll say, the Mid-South up and down the Mississippi, and looking at the current hybrids, but also potentially newer hybrids coming, like I mentioned, the pod shatter resistance ones.
So as a company, or maybe I should say more broadly, just as an industry and within the canola industry, are there any goals in terms of what the southern United States could generate in terms of acreage for winter canola?
Yeah, boy, when you look at it, and there are pockets across, I would say, the southern U.S. that grow winter canola quite frequently, I would say, that have, I'll say, smaller crushers, so smaller manufacturers of it, right? And so those folks are small, but people have experience in growing winter canola in those geographies. So again, when I get back to that winter hardiness piece, right? You follow that line across and down, that's where you can grow winter canola, pretty much. Now, there are a couple of places I know we can't grow winter canola today. And I say today because we will figure it out eventually. It's really when you get into those really wet soils. All right, so soils that waterlog and stuff.
They don't like wet feet.
They do not like wet feet. Wet feet is really when you get a waterlogged soil and the plant sits there for a while and it doesn't do well. And so that's one thing we've noticed in this. So getting well-drained soils are going to be key in this. And I would also say, too, when you think about winter canola, it requires a certain amount of years before planting back into a field again. Otherwise, you run the risk of increased disease or pest in that case, too. So that will be important as well.
Chad, so this has been great, and I can tell you that I am very interested now. Didn't know that you had 5,000 acres under production. I'm expecting an invitation, by the way, to come down and see some of those fields.
Absolutely.
So I really enjoyed it. I want to thank you, Chad, for joining us today, and thank you for listening. And be sure to like or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next week for another episode of the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. To catch all the latest from Clean Fuels Alliance America, follow us at cleanfuels.org. The Better, Cleaner, Now podcast is a production of Clean Fuels Alliance America. That's all for us. Now it's your turn to be better, cleaner, now.